guys, my name is Sheikh Mohammad Suhail and my topic is hierarchical clustering. So let's get started.
So what basically is clustering? Clustering is the process of grouping a set of objects into classes of similar objects. It is a most common form of unsupervised learning. Unsupervised learning, it is a learning from raw data. How cluster is formed? Given are some data points plotted, we have to consolidate similar data points to form a cluster. After combining similar data points together, we get clusters as shown. Produces a set of nested clusters organized as hierarchical tree. It can be visualized as a dendrogram. A dendrogram is a tree-like diagram that records the sequence of merges and splits as shown below. Two main types of hierarchical clustering are agglomerative and divisive. Agglomerative is a bottom-up approach where we combine clusters repeatedly until a single cluster is left. On the other hand, divisive clustering is a top-down approach where we start with one cluster and at each step split a cluster until each cluster contains a point. We are going to learn about them in detail. Divisive hierarchical approach is commonly known as top-down approach because in this it generally starts with a single cluster. Then after every iteration, the cluster is split into smaller clusters until a single cluster is formed or a termination condition takes place. Hierarchical agglomerative clustering, commonly known as HAC. It is the most popular hierarchical clustering technique. It starts with one cluster, individual item in its own cluster, and iteratively merge clusters until all the items belong to one cluster. It is a bottom-up approach followed by merge the clusters together. Dendrograms are pictorially used to represent the HAC. There are three types of agglomerative clustering: single link, complete link, and average link. Single link, it is the distance between the clusters C1 and Cg which is kept minimum and then made the cluster between them. Single link distance is given by minimum of dxy where x belongs to Ci and y belongs to Cj. With this formula, we find the closest pair of data points. After finding the closest pair, we merge them to form a cluster and repeat it to form bigger clusters, that is, until a single cluster is left. As you can see, we have merged the closest points to form a cluster using a single linkage. For example, here we have formed the cluster between the data point 3 and 6 and name it as a cluster 1. Also, we have merged data point 5 and 2 to form a cluster number 2. Similarly, we have formed a cluster between cluster 1 and cluster 2 and name it as cluster 3. And then cluster between data point 4 and cluster 3 is formed and name it as cluster 4. Then finally the cluster between data point 1 and cluster 4 to form a bigger cluster, that is number 5. Then dendrogram for the same is made. For example, cluster between data point 3 and 6 is formed. After that, the cluster between data point 2 and 5 is formed. These two clusters are joined together to make a bigger cluster, that is cluster 3. Then cluster 3 is merged with data point 4. Also, the cluster 4 is merged with data point 1 and it is a single cluster that is left. Complete link or complete linkage distance. It is the distance between Ci and Cj, which is maximum distance between data points. The distance is defined by the two most similar objects, and it is given by distance complete, which is given by max of dxy, where x belongs to Ci and y belongs to Cj. The third type of HAC is group average distance. Group average distance between clusters Ci and Cj is the average distance between any object in Ci and any object in Cj. D average of Ci and Cj is given by 1 upon modulus of Ci into modulus of Cj, summation of dxy, where x belongs to Ci and y belongs to Cj. That's all from my side. I hope you understand this topic. Give this video a thumbs up.